It was a quiet afternoon at the city's busiest public market. Sunlight spilled over colorful stalls. The smell of fresh bread mingled with spices from faraway lands. Children laughed as they ran past, chasing stray balloons. Musicians played soft tunes, their melodies weaving through the chatter of shoppers. Among the crowd, a calm older man walked slowly, hands behind his back, eyes scanning the market with quiet appreciation. He was dressed plainly, nothing flashy, nothing to draw attention. But there was something in the way he moved, measured, deliberate, almost as if he belonged everywhere and nowhere at the same time. Around him, the world hummed with life. People bartered, friends laughed, and tourists snapped pictures. Yet, for reasons no one could see, a tension hung faintly in the air. Something unspoken, like the calm before a storm. No one noticed the tall figure moving through the crowd. Broad shoulders, a sharp jaw, eyes glinting with irritation. He wasn't here for the market or the music. His focus locked on the older man, the calm center of this bustling scene. Then, almost imperceptibly, the man brushed past the older gentleman. The older man didn't flinch. He didn't raise his voice. He merely stepped aside, muttering a soft apology. But the other man wasn't satisfied. He stopped, turned, and glared. The crowd remained oblivious, yet something was shifting. Something that would change everything in the next few seconds. The air thickened. Conversations paused mid-sentence. Children slowed their laughter. Even the musicians faltered, their notes lingering awkwardly in the air. Because one man was about to make the biggest mistake of his life. The calm of the market was deceptive. No one noticed it at first, but tension was brewing just beneath the surface. The older man continued strolling through the aisles, stopping occasionally to glance at a basket of fresh fruit or a handcrafted trinket. There was an air of serenity around him, almost magnetic in its quiet confidence. People subconsciously gave him space, drawn to his composed presence without realizing why. Then, from the far end of the market, a shadow approached, tall, broad, every step heavy, every movement sharp. This man was the exact opposite of calm, restless, impatient, and full of aggression that didn't belong in a place meant for families and laughter. His eyes scanned the crowd until they locked on the older man. A slight misstep, a moment of distraction, and the two collided. The bully slammed into the older man, nearly knocking him sideways. "Watch where you're going, old man," he barked, his voice echoing louder than necessary, piercing through the chatter of the market. The older man, calm as a still lake, didn't flinch. He straightened his back, his eyes meeting the bully's, not with fear, not with anger, but with something else, something deeper. Respect, maybe. Patience, definitely. He murmured a soft, measured apology. "I'm sorry, didn't see you there." The words were simple. They carried no threat, no challenge. But the tone, steady, unwavering, was almost unnerving. The bully, however, wasn't here for civility. He was here for domination. He glared, leaning closer, his shadow looming over the older man. "Sorry doesn't cut it, old man. Watch yourself next time, or I'll make sure you remember this." Shoppers nearby started to notice. A few paused mid-step, glancing over with curiosity. Phones suddenly came out. Cameras hovering, fingers ready to capture the unfolding confrontation. Children slowed, sensing tension, and even the musicians faltered, their hands lingering over instruments. Despite the rising aggression, the older man remained perfectly still, like a rock in a river being buffeted by the current. There was no panic, no defensive posture. Just calm eyes and measured breathing. The bully's irritation grew. Each passing second of silence from the older man fueled his rage. He jabbed his finger toward the man's chest. "Do you hear me?" he shouted, spittle flying slightly with each word. "I hear you," the older man said softly, almost whispering. "And I wish you wouldn't make mistakes you'll regret." The words were met with laughter, mocking, cruel, arrogant. The bully stepped closer, looming like a predator, scanning the crowd to see if anyone would intervene. No one moved. People froze in place, watching silently. Some tried to shrink into the background. Others whispered to companions, unsure if this was a street fight, an argument, or something worse. The bully's chest heaved with rage, his pride stung by the man's calm. Most people would have cowered or shouted back, but not this man. His calmness was a mirror, reflecting the bully's anger back at him without adding fuel. The older man didn't raise his voice, didn't make a single aggressive motion. Instead, he adjusted his stance slightly, not defensively, not aggressively, simply aware, prepared. His gaze locked on the bully's eyes, and in that silence there was a message, one that only a few would understand. The crowd began to sense it too. There was something unsettling about the older man's calmness, something that made the tension feel larger than life. Phones recorded. Whisper spread. Who is he? Does he know him? Why isn't he scared? The bully, growing frustrated at the lack of reaction, leaned closer.
I'm talking to you.
You think just because you're old you can walk around here like you own the place? I don't own the place, the older man replied softly. But respect is everywhere, and it's free for those willing to see it. The words didn't land with the bully, they landed with the crowd. Shoppers exchanged glances, uncertain. Was this wisdom or a warning? No one could tell. Suddenly, the bully jabbed the older man's chest with his finger, not too hard, but enough to provoke. The older man didn't move. He didn't react, but his eyes sharpened. Calm, quiet, like a storm brewing behind placid clouds. "Nuff," the man said softly, almost too soft to hear over the bully's anger. "I don't want trouble. But trouble finds those who make mistakes." The words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken meaning. The bully sneered, misinterpreting the calm as weakness. "Ha! You talk too much for someone about to get taught a lesson." A subtle shift occurred. The crowd felt it before they saw it. A change in energy. A ripple of tension that hinted that what was coming next would shock them all. Because, unknown to the bully, the older man was not just calm, he was lethal. Not in a way anyone could see at this moment. Not yet. And in that market under the warm afternoon sun, surrounded by families and music, the first seeds of a nightmare were being planted. The bully's arrogance had set the stage. And the calm man, the man who seemed harmless, had already decided that this moment would not be forgotten. The bully's arrogance only grew as he saw no reaction. He straightened his shoulders, puffing his chest, like a predator showing dominance. His eyes scanned the crowd, hungry for validation. Some onlookers whispered among themselves, unsure whether to intervene or stay hidden. Phones hovered, capturing the tension, filled scene like a live wire, waiting for a spark.
You think you're special, huh?
The bully barked, walking around like you own the place. "Old man, do you know who you're messing with?" The older man didn't flinch. His hands stayed relaxed behind his back, his breathing steady. Every word from the bully seemed to bounce off him, absorbed into the calm aura surrounding him. "I know who I am," he said softly, his voice almost gentle. "I also know what mistakes cost, and trust me, you're about to learn the hard way." The crowd shifted uneasily. There was something in that soft voice, a controlled power, that made even the bravest hesitate. The bully scoffed, thinking it a joke. "Power? What power? You're just an old man talking nonsense." Then came the insults. Sharp, cutting, cruelly calculated, words meant to humiliate. "You're weak, pathetic. You can't even stand up for yourself." The older man remained silent. Not because he didn't hear them, not because he was afraid, but because he didn't need to engage. Every insult thrown was a brick thrown at glass. It only reflected back, leaving the bully exposed and frustrated. People began to notice the pattern. Shoppers paused mid-step, staring. Children clutched their parents' hands. Phones clicked, videos streamed, whispers spread like wildfire. "Who is this man? Why isn't he responding? Something's not right." The bully, sensing the crowd's attention, tried to escalate further. "Do you even understand what happens to people like you? I could crush you right here, old man, and no one would stop me." The calm older man tilted his head slightly, eyes locking with the bully's. A silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken tension. "I don't wish harm on you," he said, "but I also don't warn twice." It was a subtle threat, almost invisible, but the people watching could feel it. The older man's calm wasn't weakness. It was the quiet before the storm. And something deep inside the bully stirred, a small flicker of unease that he refused to acknowledge. The crowd's fascination grew. This wasn't just another argument. This was theater. Every word, every pause, every glance felt weighted. People whispered, "He's not scared. But something tells me he could end this instantly." The bully, frustrated at the lack of fear, raised his voice even louder.
I'm done talking. You'll learn respect the hard way.
The older man didn't respond immediately. He simply adjusted his stance, calm, deliberate, unwavering. His eyes didn't flicker, his hands didn't move. But there was a quiet intensity building, almost imperceptible, a signal to anyone who understood that this man was far from ordinary. The bully, failing to intimidate, leaned even closer, lowering his voice to a menacing growl. "I don't care about your calmness. You think this crowd will protect you. You're nothing without it." The older man finally broke the silence, but his words were measured, soft, yet ice, cold in meaning. "You've already lost, not because of me, but because you can't see what's coming." It was subtle, But the crowd felt it. A ripple passed through them, a shiver, a collective realization that the older man was not just calm, he was in control. Phones lifted, zoomed in, and people started murmuring, "Who is he? He doesn't even flinch, it's like he's untouchable." The bully, growing impatient, slammed his fist onto a nearby stall, rattling jars of spices and trinkets. His anger was palpable, uncontrolled, in contrast to the older man's serene, deadly precision. And then, without warning, the bully crossed a line. A step too close, a hand that lingered too long, a threat spoken too loudly. The calm balance shattered. The quiet warning the older man had given earlier, the one few understood, was about to manifest. The crowd leaned in, sensing that something monumental was about to happen, something irreversible, something no one would forget, because the calm older man wasn't just enduring. He was preparing, and the bully had just sealed his fate. The market had fallen into an uneasy rhythm, each sound amplified by tension. Footsteps echoed differently, conversations stuttered, laughter became hesitant. The older man's calm aura had transformed the crowd into observers of a silent battle. No one dared intervene, the air itself seemed to hold its breath. The bully, frustration burning hotter with every second, took a step closer. His shadow fell over the older man, broad and imposing. He glared, chest heaving, veins visible in his neck. Every muscle screamed aggression, every movement demanded dominance.
I said enough.
He barked, his voice cutting through the market like a whip.
You're done talking. You're going to learn respect the hard way.
The older man remained motionless, hands behind his back, shoulders relaxed. His eyes met the bully's, calm, unyielding, almost unnervingly steady. The crowd, sensing the silent tension, leaned closer, phones poised. A few whispered to one another. Something's about to happen, you can feel it. Then, in a sudden surge of bravado, the bully raised his hand. Time seemed to slow. Fingers extended. The crowd collectively held its breath. Smack, the slap landed, sharp, brutal. The sound cracked through the market like glass breaking. Shoppers froze mid-step, a basket of fruit teetering in the hands of a woman nearby. Children gasped, some covering their mouths instinctively. Musicians paused mid-note, sticks suspended in the air. Silence fell instantly, a vacuum of shock. The older man staggered back slightly, not from pain, but from the force of the action. His face remained composed, eyes still locked on the bully. The audacity of the act hung in the air like smoke. The crowd whispered, some shocked, some horrified.
He just slapped him in public. No one does that.
What's going to happen next? Phones clicked rapidly, cameras capturing every detail, the footage destined to go viral before the market even recovered. The bully sneered, thinking he had won, thinking that fear had been instilled. See, I told you.
Respect comes from strength. You should have kept your mouth shut.
But the older man didn't shout. He didn't move aggressively. He simply took a measured step forward, closing the distance, his calm energy radiating like a physical force. The kind of calm that doesn't invite retaliation, it demands respect. He raised one hand slowly, almost lazily, and the crowd instinctively stepped back. There was no rage, no reaction, yet in that motion, in the way his eyes narrowed, there was an unspoken warning, a message as clear as any gunshot: do not test me further. The bully, sensing the shift in energy but blinded by arrogance, leaned closer, preparing to strike again. Then the older man spoke, calmly, deliberately, every word measured. I tried to stop you, not for me, but for you. You don't know the danger you've invited. The words cut sharper than any slap. The crowd murmured. Phones continued to roll. People felt the electricity in the air, the tension growing like a storm. The bully's confidence wavered for a fraction of a second, barely noticeable. It was all it took. The older man's eyes, cold and precise, locked on him fully. In that instant, the bully realized he was no longer facing a simple man, he was facing someone far beyond his reckoning. A subtle shift in posture, a slight tightening of the older man's stance, and suddenly the energy around him felt dangerous. Not violent, not yet, but controlled, lethal and inevitable. The crowd, sensing the change, leaned back instinctively. Some whispered, he's not just an old man. Look at him, he's dangerous. But the bully couldn't see it. He only knew the slap had landed, the momentary victory of arrogance. And that miscalculation, that single misjudgment, was about to define everything. Time slowed even further in the minds of the witnesses. Every movement became cinematic, the flutter of a scarf in the breeze, a fruit basket wobbling on a stall, the subtle intake of a child's breath, all punctuating the singular truth: the calm older man had not reacted violently. Not yet. And that, more than anything, made the crowd uneasy. Because everyone instinctively knew when a storm doesn't rage immediately, it's only building, waiting, precise, and utterly unstoppable. The market's music, chatter, and life were frozen. Every eye focused on the older man and the bully. One had reacted out of arrogance, impulse, and ego. The other waited. And in that waiting, in that perfect, chilling calm, the audience understood something terrifying. The bully had crossed a line he could never uncross. The market had returned to a tense silence. Shoppers froze in place, unsure whether to step closer or run, their eyes darting between the older man and the bully. The slap had landed, the audacity of it echoing in every corner of the square. And yet the older man still stood calm, unshaken, almost serene. He took a slow breath, letting the silence stretch just long enough to make the bully uneasy. Every person watching felt it. Even if they couldn't explain it, there was power in this calm, a kind of energy that made the air itself heavy. The bully, however, was too blinded by his temporary dominance to notice. He puffed out his chest, convinced he had won. "You hear me? You're nothing. Do you understand?" he shouted, jabbing a finger toward the older man's chest. The older man tilted his head slightly, meeting his gaze evenly. "I hear you," he said softly, his voice carrying a weight far heavier than the bully anticipated. "But I also see what's coming. And I wish you understood the danger isn't what's in front of you." The words were subtle, but the implication hung in the air like a storm cloud. The bully blinked, confused. He couldn't interpret the calm, couldn't sense the warning behind the measured tone. He laughed nervously, trying to mask the flicker of doubt that had crept into his mind. "Danger? What are you talking about? Look at me," the bully barked. "You think you're scary. You're just an old man, weak and slow." The older man's gaze didn't waver. He stepped closer, not threateningly, not aggressively, but with a presence that seemed to bend the space around him. The crowd instinctively stepped back. Children held their parents' hands tighter, some mouths hanging open, phones recording every nuance. "I tried to stop you," the older man said quietly, almost whispering. "Not for me, for you. Because what's coming will not be something you can run from." The bully laughed again, nervously this time, masking the tension building in his chest. He flexed his fists, ready for another confrontation, but something subtle had shifted. He felt it in the older man's stance, the way he carried himself, the way the silence pressed against him like a physical weight. Around them, the market seemed to shrink. Shoppers instinctively gave space, creating an invisible barrier between the two men. Every passerby could sense the calm danger radiating from the older man. It wasn't anger. It wasn't aggression. It was control, absolute control. The bully attempted one last intimidation.
I don't care what you say. Nobody scares me in my town.
The older man responded, soft, deliberate, chillingly calm. "You've already been warned. The mistake you made, it's bigger than you realize. And it's not me standing in front of you that's the real danger." The words cut through the air like ice. The crowd murmured, whispering among themselves. Phones continued to roll, but the whispers were louder than any slap, louder than any shout. He's not just calm. There's more. Something else waiting." The bully's bravado wavered. He laughed again, forced, but the unease had planted itself deep. He looked around at the crowd, searching for validation, for anyone to back him up, but all eyes were on the older man. Every spectator felt it, something unseen, something inevitable. The older man took a step back, letting the bully's chest heave with frustrated energy. "I tried to prevent this, because you've already walked into a storm you cannot imagine," he said. "And yet, you laugh. That laughter will be your last." Even in that calm, even in the absence of immediate action, the crowd felt it. Something was coming, and it wasn't just one man taking revenge. It was a consequence bigger than the bully could understand. He tried to mask it with another sneer, another taunt, but his hands betrayed him, slightly shaking, betraying the tension building inside. He was alone in his arrogance. And the older man, calm as ever, didn't move toward him. He let the tension stretch, let it settle, letting the bully imagine every possible outcome. A subtle breeze drifted through the market, rustling scarves and loose papers. It felt like nature itself paused in anticipation. The older man's calmness was a warning. The bully's arrogance, a ticking clock. Because the truth that no one else could see yet was this: the real danger wasn't standing in front of him. It was already in motion, and it was about to arrive without warning. The crowd's fascination deepened. No one dared breathe too loudly. They were caught between fear and curiosity, unable to look away. Every second stretched, every heartbeat echoed, every gaze fixed. And in that tense electric silence, the older man finally lowered his gaze slightly, as if saying, "Prepare yourself, because soon you will understand. What you did cannot be undone." The market still held its breath. The bully, chest heaving, hands twitching, still failed to recognize the calm older man's true nature. He believed the danger had passed because no immediate retaliation had occurred, but the tension was about to explode in ways he could never have imagined. Suddenly, in the distance, a low hum began to rise, faint at first, almost imperceptible. The crowd didn't notice immediately. Children paused mid-step, the wind rustling loose papers, the musicians plucking a hesitant note. Then, a flash of black appeared at the edge of the street. Black SUVs, sleek, polished, official. Engines humming like a predator stalking prey. Tires whispered over the cobblestones as they glided toward the market. Windows tinted dark, reflecting the sky above. The bully squinted, curiosity briefly replacing arrogance. "What the hell?" he muttered. His bravado wavered for the first time. Within seconds, the vehicle stopped. Doors opened simultaneously. Federal agents, precise and disciplined, spilled out, forming a cordon around the market. Their presence was instantaneous, overwhelming, and undeniably authoritative. People instinctively stepped back, creating a wide circle around the older man and the bully. The energy shifted completely. The bully's sneer faltered. The adrenaline, fueled arrogance that had carried him this far began to crack. He scanned the agents, then the vehicles, then back at the older man. Confusion twisted his features. And then the final figure emerged, calm, commanding, walking with quiet authority. The older man's eyes lifted, and the crowd gasped collectively. The man in black paused before the older man and spoke softly but clearly. "Dad, are you okay?" The world seemed to stop. The market, the bully, the crowd, even the breeze, everything froze. The bully's jaw dropped. His mind raced, unable to process the truth. The older man, the calm, composed, unassuming figure he had humiliated, was not just any man. He was the father of the Chief of Homeland Security. Someone with connections, influence, and power beyond comprehension. Someone who didn't need to fight physically to have authority. The crowd began to murmur, whispers growing rapidly. "That's the chief's father. He's untouchable." He just slapped a man with connections like that. The older man's calm expression didn't change, not a flicker. Yet in his eyes was the silent acknowledgement the lesson had been delivered. The bully had crossed a line, and the consequences had arrived before he could even react. The agents positioned themselves around the bully, subtly, strategically. Not aggressive yet, just enough to communicate that resistance would be pointless. The bully stumbled backward, panic finally replacing arrogance. I didn't know," he stammered. Words failed him. His bravado dissolved in an instant, leaving raw fear and shame. The older man, still calm, took a step forward. His voice was quiet but carried a weight that silenced everyone further. "Respect is not given to those who take it by force. It is earned. And you have failed every test today." The crowd watched in stunned awe. Phones captured the moment, the lesson, the reveal, the fear in the bully's eyes. It was cinematic, viral, perfectly crafted in real life. The Chief of Homeland Security, standing behind his father, placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "It's okay, Dad. He's learned. He won't forget." The older man gave a subtle nod, his calm composure never breaking. The bully, surrounded, humbled, and terrified, finally understood the gravity of his mistake. "Everything you did, every insult, every act of aggression, has consequences you could not see," the older man continued. "And the real danger wasn't standing in front of you. It was waiting quietly, observing, prepared." The crowd erupted in whispers and soft gasps. Some stepped closer, needing to process what had happened. Some just stayed frozen, eyes wide, hearts racing. Every person in that market had witnessed a lesson in humility, control, and respect. The bully's defeat was complete, not by fists, not by force, but by the sheer presence, calm, and authority of a man who had every right to remain hidden, and yet chose to teach a lesson in the most powerful way possible. And as the agents escorted him away, the older man remained in the center of the market, serene, composed, untouchable. He looked around at the crowd, his calm presence radiating a simple but profound message: respect is not demanded. It is given freely to those who deserve it. The market slowly returned to life. The music resumed, chatter hesitated, children laughed cautiously, and phones continued to roll, streaming every second of the confrontation to viewers far beyond the market. Because in that moment, the world had witnessed more than a simple altercation. They had witnessed power, calm, and justice intertwined. and the bully, humiliated, shamed, and controlled, would carry the memory of that day forever. The market was slowly returning to its rhythm. Shoppers began moving again, but the atmosphere had changed. Laughter was softer, conversations quieter, and even the children sensed the weight of what had just unfolded. Phones continued to record, uploading the footage to the world outside, but no filter or caption could capture the true lesson: calm strength commands more respect than aggression ever could. The older man, Steven, stood in the center of the market, serene, composed, untouchable. His eyes scanned the faces around him, some shocked, some awed, some inspired. He didn't smile, but there was a quiet satisfaction in his posture, not pride, not arrogance. Just peace, the kind that comes from knowing the right lesson has been delivered in the right way. The bully had been escorted away by the federal agents. He was silent now, his bravado gone, replaced by a raw, uncomfortable humility. He had learned a lesson that words alone could never convey. One that would echo in his mind for the rest of his life. Actions have consequences, and disrespect can invite forces far beyond your understanding. Steven took a slow step forward, addressing the market with a calm, commanding voice. Respect is not something you demand. It is not something you take by force. It is given freely because it is recognition of another person's humanity. The crowd listened, rapt. Phones were lowered now, people absorbing the words instead of just the spectacle. Children tilted their heads, trying to understand, while adults felt the depth of what had transpired. Strength, he continued, is not in the ability to strike first or to humiliate or to dominate. True strength is control. Control over yourself, control over your reactions, and the ability to act with intention rather than impulse. That is the power most people never see. A few individuals nodded, some whispered to one another, repeating the words, "Strength is control." Others sat quietly, absorbing the lesson in their own way, realizing how often they had equated aggression with respect, misunderstanding the essence of power. Steven looked down at the place where the bully had stood. He didn't feel anger anymore. There was no desire for revenge, only clarity, only understanding. The man before him had acted out of ego, out of arrogance and ignorance. The older man had not retaliated because he didn't need to. The lesson had been delivered with calm authority, leaving a mark far deeper than violence ever could. He turned back to the crowd, eyes soft but unwavering. And to everyone watching, he said, voice resonant yet gentle, remember this. Forgiving others doesn't mean accepting their wrongs. It means you recognize your own power, and you refuse to be consumed by anger. It is the greatest form of strength, and the path to true freedom. The market seemed to breathe again. Music resumed, slightly slower at first, then picking up as the crowd began moving. Children laughed hesitantly, mimicking the calm stride of the older man. Adults carried a subtle change in their posture, a weight lifted, a new understanding dawning. Some stepped forward to thank him. Others just nodded respectfully from a distance. The lesson was clear: humility, patience, and controlled strength could command more respect than feared or aggression ever could. Steven's gaze lingered on the horizon for a moment, watching life continue around him. The market, the people, the sunlit streets, all were a reminder that true power is quiet, unseen by those seeking only to dominate. Finally, he spoke one last time, softly but firmly. If you believe respect should be given to everyone, no matter who they are or where they come from, comment respect. Not because it earns you likes, not because it earns attention, but because it is a promise to carry this truth forward in your own life. The crowd murmured, some typing on their phones immediately, others whispering the word aloud, creating a ripple of energy that spread beyond the market, beyond the city, beyond the video now streaming online. Steven didn't watch the screens. He didn't seek validation. His calm was absolute. His lesson had been delivered. The bully had learned the hard way, and everyone else had witnessed a truth too often forgotten in a world driven by ego and aggression. Remember, he said quietly to himself, more than anyone else, true power isn't shown, it's understood, it's felt, and it is respected by those who recognize it. And with that, he walked slowly through the market, calm, composed, untouchable, a living testament to the quiet force of discipline, patience, and respect. The market returned to life, but the memory of the lesson lingered, long after the sun had begun to set.